Go Jump in the Pool, a Bruno and Boots story by Gordon Korman. Chapter 5, Impresario at Work. Mr. Sturgeon stepped away from the teller's cage, followed by Bruno and Boots. The headmaster handed Bruno a new gold-colored bank book. "Here it is," he said. $703.15, registered to your signatures in trust for MacDonald Hall. It is a great responsibility, and I hope you will look after it with care. Of course, sir, promised Boots. The three left the bank and climbed into the headmaster's blue Plymouth for the trip back to school. "Sir," Bruno announced as they got underway, "we have another great plan for raising money." Mr. Sturgeon's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "I suspected it wouldn't take you very long," he remarked grimly. "Would you be so kind as to outline the nature of this plan, and I shall determine whether or not it is great?" "It's a talent show, sir," Bruno said eagerly. "We'll audition anyone who wants to try out. And the tickets will be $1 apiece," Boots added. Mr. Sturgeon examined the proposal from every possible angle. It seemed harmless enough, even though it came from Bruno and Boots. "I think I might give permission for that," he said grudgingly. "Perhaps the parents would like to be invited." "At $5 a head," Bruno added with growing enthusiasm. "Walton," Mr. Sturgeon said gently, "if the parents take the time and expense to attend this affair, they should be admitted at the going rate." Visions of dollar signs vanished from Bruno's imagination. "Right, sir," he agreed sadly. "Do you think maybe, sir, we could combine with Miss Scrimmage's school for the show?" Boots ventured timidly. "That's a swell idea!" exclaimed Bruno, who had put his roommate up to the suggestion in the first place. "The more people, the more talent!" Both boys eyed their headmaster expectantly. Mr. Sturgeon was silent. Memories of his last telephone conversation with Miss Scrimmage danced crazily through his mind. She was probably still angry and would doubtless refuse to allow her school to participate. Holding that hope, he said, "Very well, I shall take it up with Miss Scrimmage." "Then we have your permission to begin auditions?" Bruno asked excitedly. Mr. Sturgeon nodded, a wary nod. The room of 107, Chris Talbot's room, burst open, and in barged Bruno and Boots, unannounced and uninvited. In the center of the room stood Chris, wrapped in a towel, his roommate, a freshman, cowered in terror at his desk. "Don't worry," Chris assured him kindly. "They're harmless. They just never learned to knock." He greeted the intruders with an elaborate sweep of his hand. "Don't be shy. Come right in." Bruno flopped down on the nearest bed and sniffed the air. "What stinks in here?" he asked, wrinkling his nose. "It isn't in here," Chris explained patiently. "That lunatic next door is disinfecting his room." "Sterilizing," Boots corrected. "That's George Wexford Smythe III, my old roommate. He does this every 48 hours. "He must use a lot of spray," said the freshman. "Sure smells strong." "Oh, George won't use aerosol propellant, not since the warnings were published. If he destroys the ozone layer," Boots explained, "the ultraviolet rays from the sun will get him. He doesn't spray the room. He washes it. All of it." "Mr. Clean," Bruno commented. "Chris, do you have a little spare time?" "Well, I was thinking of doing my homework and—" "Oh, that. Well, this is important," Bruno interrupted. "We need 8 posters advertising the auditions for our talent show." Chris reached for pen and paper. "The details," he said, all business. "I think the talent show is a wonderful idea," said Mrs. Sturgeon that evening as she counted out the Monopoly money for their weekly game. "I couldn't agree more," said Miss Scrimmage from across the table. "My girls are very enthusiastic. They're making their costumes in sewing class." "How delightful," responded Mr. Sturgeon, who hated Monopoly except that it eliminated the necessity for polite conversation during Miss Scrimmage's weekly visits. "Shall we begin? You are first, Miss Scrimmage." Miss Scrimmage gave the dice an enthusiastic toss, and the number came up 7. She advanced her token 7 spaces, reached for a chance card, and read, "Go to jail. Go directly to—" Her voice trailed off. The sound that escaped Mr. Sturgeon was suspiciously like a snicker. Under the table, his wife kicked him sharply. As he picked up the dice, he decided that he did not dislike Monopoly so much after all. The next day, little was accomplished during the last class of the afternoon, as the suddenly stage-struck student body watched the clock. Auditions for the talent show were scheduled to begin at 4 o'clock sharp. In his Canadian history class, Bruno Walton dropped an ever-so-subtle hint to the teacher. 3:30 already?" he mused loudly. My, how time flies. Very well, that will be all for today, the teacher decided. We can't have the impresario being late for his auditions. Dismissed. Bruno met Boots in the hallway, and the two boys dashed off toward the school auditorium. A stampede of undiscovered stars followed along behind them. They were met by a surging crowd of girls from Miss Scrimmage's. Okay, Bruno bellowed to quiet down the crowd. Come in and sit down. We'll start right away. We require complete silence. Everybody has to have a fair chance to compete. Boots, bring on the first act. Boots produced the registration lists that had been attached to Chris Talbot's posters. The first act is Percy the Great, he announced. One of the first-year boys appeared, lugging a large sheet of plywood. Attached to the wood was a department store dummy with a grotesque smile. In his belt, the boy carried 4 sharp knives. A knife thrower? Bruno asked incredulously. Yes, said Percy the Great. Naturally, when I do the show, it will be with a live volunteer from the audience instead of a dummy. Naturally, said Bruno. Go ahead, let's see what you can do. Obediently, Percy the Great danced around the stage, flourishing a razor-sharp knife. At last, he held it gracefully by the tip, reared back, and let fly. Snap! The knife neatly severed the dummy's head at the neck. The still smiling head rolled across the stage and came to rest at Bruno's feet. When the laughter and cheers died down, Bruno said firmly, Sorry, Percy, old boy, but your real live volunteer is going to end up real dead. Next act. Elmer Grimsdale, Boots announced dubiously. Elmer ascended the stage and looked hopefully at Bruno through his thick glasses. What do you do, Elm? Bruno asked in surprise. Elmer was known as a genius, but no one was aware that he had any talent. My act, he said timidly, is entitled The Song of the Humpbacked Whale. Everyone tittered except Bruno Walton, who had once roomed with Elmer and half expected something of the sort. Go ahead, let's hear it. Screwing his face up horribly, Elmer emitted a series of grunts, groans, mournful moans, squeals, and moos. Finally, his face and voice back to normal, he explained, Whales converse in this way. That was symbolic of greetings, or perhaps a whale is here. Bruno observed the audience reaction, which ranged from broad smiles to howls of hysteria. He signaled for order and got it. Elmer, that was great, but it was too short. I also do bird calls, Elmer offered hopefully. Bruno slammed a fist into his palm with delight. I don't even have to hear them. You work on it and be ready for rehearsal. You're in the show. Boots, put down Elmer Grimsdale. As what? Boots asked. As an impressionist of nature, Bruno declared. Next act. Next was a pair of seniors from MacDonald Hall who had brought along their own records, straw hats, and canes, and shuffled around the stage, bumping into each other roughly in time to the music. They promised faithfully to polish up the act with practice, and Boots put them down as a possibility. Next. Eleanor Noseworthy, Boots called out. A short, plump girl appeared on the stage. I do a gourmet act, she informed them proudly. Great, said Bruno. What exactly is that? I prepare a dish that I call Bœuf Noseworthy avec oignon. Bruno stammered. We have no facilities for cooking on stage. Sorry. Next act. The Amazing Frederick, Boots announced. The curtains parted to reveal the Amazing Frederick himself, carrying a large fish tank filled with water. Well, what's your act? Asked Bruno somewhat wearily. I hold my head under water for 3 minutes, replied the Amazing Frederick. All right, Bruno said. Go to it. Everyone watched with awe as the Amazing Frederick drew an enormous breath and plunged his head into the fish tank, his face toward the audience. 2 minutes passed in total silence, and then the crowd began to get edgy as the Amazing Frederick's contorted face went from red to purple to blue, and the bubbles started rising. Bruno, pull him out! He's drowning! He'll die! He's my brother. Leave him in there. Help! Around the 3-minute mark, the Amazing Frederick heaved himself out of the tank, drew another mighty breath, wrapped his head in a large beach towel, and collapsed, amid thunderous applause from all present. Boots! Called Bruno. Sign him up! He'll be a smash! Shaking his head in a what-will-they-think-of-next manner, Boots put the Amazing Frederick down on the list. Bruno then proceeded to turn down a singer who must have attracted every dog within hearing range of MacDonald Hall, a tap dancer who was fair until she slipped and twisted her ankle, a barbershop quartet who accomplished about as much harmony as a diesel horn, and 2 comedy skits that weren't funny at all. Next, Bruno said. He was becoming bored. The Scrimets? Kathy Burton climbed onto the stage and whispered to Bruno at great length. Put the skermets down for the show, Boots, called Bruno as Kathy left the stage. Next! Super Hackenschleimer, announced Boots, who was no longer surprised by anything. This was, of course, Wilbur Hackenschleimer, who pledged that he would lift a piano for the show. Bruno was thrilled with the idea, though the crowd had other reactions. Don't let him do it, Bruno! He'll wind up in traction. He'll kill himself. A hernia. A slipped disc. Why would anybody want to lift a piano? But Bruno's decision was final, and Super Hackenschleimer was in show business. Next! Next was a magician who wasn't too bad at demonstrating that the hand was quicker than the eye, if not his hand. He promised to polish his routine, though, and Bruno had Boots sign him up because the show needed a magic act. The auditions went on until 5:30, when the dining bell rang. While en route to the dining hall, Bruno and Boots discussed the acts they had seen and which of the possibles deserved to be put into the show. It was in the cafeteria line that they found themselves standing next to George Wexford Smythe III. What outrageous sort of contest were you organizing in the auditorium today? George asked Bruno in disgust. It caused a stampede in the hall, and I was almost trampled. It's not for you, Boots cut in. It's vulgar. I would expect it to be, said George as Bruno and Boots abandoned him and took their trays off to their table. Tickets for the big show, scheduled for a week from Saturday, went on sale immediately. Invitations were mailed out to the parents, and quite a few agreed to attend. Rehearsals began in earnest. Bruno had appointed himself master of ceremonies, and in addition to running the rehearsals, he and Boots were hard at work putting together short comedy routines to spot in between the various acts. Late one night, after lights out, Bruno hauled Boots out of bed with an idea for yet another hilarious skit. I finally get to sleep after writing one of those ridiculous letters to my parents about how happy I am at the hall. The fourth one in 2 days, Boots moaned. And you have to wake me up. Why can't you get your ideas in the daytime? Because in the daytime my head is all balled up with math and geography and junk like that. Now listen, you'll come out and say, "Good evening, ladies and germs." Are you crazy? Boots exploded. People stopped laughing at that 50 years ago. Comedy doesn't change, Bruno lectured him. If it was funny 50 years ago, it'll be funny in our show. We'll be lynched, Boots predicted mournfully. That's even worse than your ugliest man in the world routine. Go back to bed, Bruno grumbled. You have the sense of humor of a loaf of bread. You'll be happier at York Academy where nobody laughs because they're too stupid. And what about some of the acts? Boots continued. What about Wilbur? He doesn't come to rehearsal. How do we know he can lift a piano? Don't worry, Wilbur could lift the auditorium and everybody in it. What about the Skermets? Boots persisted. We haven't even seen their act. They're rehearsing privately, said Bruno. That's Kathy, Bruno, Kathy! There's no telling what they'll do. They dance, Bruno replied calmly. They have all kinds of ballet lessons at scrimmages. I'm sure they'll be good. They were interrupted by a tapping at the door, and the voice of the housemaster, Mr. Fudge. Hey, knock it off in there, it's past midnight. Bruno and Boots went back to bed.